Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to today's webcast. I'm really glad that you can join us today for this very interesting conversation on diversity and inclusion. I'm Amy Yi. I'm the research associate from the Human Capital Center with the conference board. This is a conference keynote webcast. What it means is that this webcast provides you with the top highlights from our recent diversity inclusion conference held in Brooklyn, New York in June. So this conference was able to convene hundreds of D&I leaders and also business leaders from different companies and industries to discuss issues and challenges in the D&I space, and also to showcase some best practice organizations are using to address those issues and challenges. And today I'm very fortunate to have invited a few guest speakers from the conference to share their perspective on this topic and also some actionable solutions to address those challenges and bridge the gaps. So as you can see from the screens, here are some top issues and topics that we will be covering today in our discussion. The first one is, how can organizations build an inclusive culture where employees belong? And we're also interested about accountability. So how are leaders held accountable for creating and sustaining an inclusive workplace? We talk a lot about allies. So why is it important to engage allies, and what can organizations do? And last but not least, we're also interested in the measurement. So what are some effective ways that organizations can use to measure the success of D&I initiatives? So before I get started and introduce our panel, I want to go over a few housekeeping items with you to help you better participate in today's webcast. So the first, I'd like to really encourage you to engage our conversation. So my discussion with the guest speakers will be very interactive. It will be a dialogue versus a presentation. So I highly recommend you to chime in throughout the program with your questions or comments that you have based on the conversation that we will have. So I will be monitoring your comments throughout the program, and hopefully we can address them in real time. So the slides will be available for download, and the link is at the bottom of your screen. To make the screen larger, you can click on the 4 arrows at the top right-hand corner of the screen. And there will be a brief evaluation for you to fill out at the end of our presentation. It only takes a few minutes to complete. So please do let us know what you think of today's webcast, as that will be the only way for us to improve going forward. This webcast will be made available on demand following today's presentation, and usually within 48 hours. You can access it anytime on the conference board website, and feel free to share the recordings with your colleagues and friends who are interested in this topic. Most important thing that I like to highlight now is that for those of you who attend the webcast today and interested in earning HRCI, SHRM, and CPE credits, you can do so by attending the webcast live only. So to request these credits, please make sure you enter your name, your email address, and what type of the credits you're seeking on the lower right side of your screen. So you will also need to respond to 3 pop-ups throughout the program, and so please look out for those. So with that, I'd be very pleased to introduce our panel today. So we have 3 guest speakers today, and the first one is Lee G. Thomas from Southern California, Edison. Hi, Lee G. Thank you so much for joining us. Would you please say a few words about yourself and your team, also your company?
Sure, happy to, Amy. So I want to start first by thanking the conference board for inviting me to share what we're doing at Southern California Edison. So a little bit about diversity inclusion at Southern California Edison. At the company, we have 12 employee resource groups. I lead a team of 7 full-time dedicated rock star members of my team who drive diversity and an inclusive culture for over 12,000 employees who work for us. We have driven down accountability to the business unit level on both diversity, but more importantly, on creating an inclusive culture. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later in the presentation. Leadership around diversity and inclusion at Southern California Edison starts at the top with our board. So we have a very diverse board, over 50% when you look at gender and ethnic diversity. And as most of us know, the opportunities around diversity at the board level, companies are celebrating getting over 20%. So it's something we're proud of, the diversity of our board. We do have training around inclusive leadership, bias, unconscious bias, etc. We've also made a number of commitments in this area and have a number of partnerships. There's just a couple that are listed here. So we are signers on to the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, which is the largest gathering of CEOs who have come together to pledge action and measurable outcomes around diversity and inclusion. So our CEO, Pedro Pizarro, is one of the signers on that commitment. We have also signed the Paradigm for Parity, which is a public commitment to achieve 50-50 men and women in senior roles by 2030. So certainly a focus on driving gender diversity for a company. We've also launched partnerships such as Fairy God Boss, which is all about transparency around the experience of women working at Southern California Edison. And let me just say, back up a little, for those who are not familiar with Southern California Edison, we're a large public utility in Southern California, and parent company is Edison International, Fortune 250, that is at the forefront of driving the clean energy future state of California. So that's my intro, and I'm happy to talk more about and looking forward to this conversation around driving inclusion in corporate America.
Thank you so much, Leiji, and thank you for joining us. We actually already have a question asking about how many people sit on your company's board.
Edison International has 11. So there's a board for Edison International, the public company, and then there's also a board for Southern California Edison. I believe it's 11 at the Edison International parent company board.
Great. Thanks again, Leiji. So our next speakers are from the same company. So we have Kristen Weber and Zachary Rubenstein from Expedia Group. So Kristen and Zach, would you spend a few minutes just talking about yourself and also the company?
Sure. Thank you so much for having Zach and I today. My name is Kristen Weber. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am a full-time program manager in diversity and inclusion at Expedia Group. I've been in this role for about 2 years, although my career at Expedia has lasted the last 12. So I obviously love it here very much. And I will let Zach introduce himself and say a few words about Expedia Group overall.
Hi, everybody. Very happy to be here. My name is Zach Rubenstein. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Kristen and I, we're not only from the same company, Expedia Group, but we're actually on the same team. So we sit on an engagement team who has many initiatives. One among them is diversity and inclusion. And let me share, you can see that slide right there. It's going to be really a high-level overview of Expedia Group as a whole. And as we move through the presentation today, we'll talk a little bit more about our specific diversity initiatives. Expedia Group is one of the world's largest online travel platforms. And if you can see the slide here, you'll see that we have over 24,000 employees. We service over 200 travel sites in over 70 different countries. Not many people, I think, realize how big Expedia Group is, but we are truly, truly global in pretty much every major city around the world. What's interesting about our engagement team that Kristen and I are on is we sit in one of the brands. We sit in Expedia brand. There's an image down on this slide right here that shows just some of Expedia Group's brands. We have over 20, and they include Expedia.com, Hotels.com, Vrbo, Orbitz, among many others. So Kristen and I, we really have the privilege, we call it, of being in not only Expedia Group, but we don't sit in HR, which for many companies globally, diversity and inclusion is housed in HR. By not being in HR, we truly do see diversity and inclusion as a business imperative and initiative. And it gives us a lot of flexibility to see our own employees as our customers and build their competencies.
Great. Thank you so much, Zach and Kristen. It's really impressive. So before I start my conversation with the three guest speakers, I'd like to first show a short video clip which was taken at our recent Diversity and Inclusion Conference in Brooklyn. It was when our EVP of Human Capital, Rebecca Ray, received a citation from the Brooklyn Borough President, Eric Adams, for honoring the conference board's 100 years commitment for diversity and inclusion. So let's watch the video now together.
I'm going to conclude with, you can't come to Brooklyn without getting the Brooklyn citation. And so I'm going to give this proclamation citation to the conference board. Who's represented? Okay.
What a great way to start.
So on behalf of all Brooklynites, 2.6 million people, we have a level of arrogancy. We believe there's only two types of Americans, those who live in Brooklyn and those who wish they could. So on behalf of all of them, we want to thank you for holding this conference here and really open our minds and thoughts on how do we use our powers to diversify our employment atmospheres. And we want to thank you for all that you've done for this borough and this city. Congratulations.
Thank you, Borough President Adams. What a wonderful way to start, and what a great honor. On behalf of the conference board, I thank you so much. We're excited to be here in diverse and inclusive Brooklyn. And we're also proud to have been a champion for D&I causes throughout most of our 100-year-plus history. So on behalf of the conference board, thank you for this incredible honor.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the video with us. So I apologize that I saw there's some comments that the volume is low. So you didn't miss anything. We just want to highlight that it's a really important moment for the conference board for honoring our commitment to the diversity and inclusion. So as you can see, that D&I is not a new topic, but the gaps still exist in this space. So how can organizations respond to and address those issues and create an inclusive workplace that everyone feels a sense of belonging? So this is a discussion question that we'll. So I'd like to first start with a general question with one of our speakers, Liji. So Liji, would you mind provide a high-level overview of your D&I strategy at Southern California Edison, and how does your company integrate your D&I strategy into your business strategy?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned in my introduction, the business strategy for Southern California Edison is really around driving the clean energy future. And in order to do that, we need the best and brightest minds to solve one of the world's toughest problems. So, we look very intentionally at our talent. And one of the things that we've been doing is really looking at this conversation holistically. So you'll see a slide up that talks about our pay framework, which may be useful to several of our attendees today. So let me just talk through this generally, and it'll show to you one of the things that we're doing, which is looking at the conversation holistically. So PAY stands for, the P stands for pay, A stands for access, the second A stands for advancement, and the last A stands for environment. So we're looking holistically at the employee experience, and how do we really unleash the full potential of all our employees. So let me talk through this briefly, and then happy to entertain questions. Around pay, there's a lot of talk about pay equity in corporate America. So we want to look very intentionally at, are we providing fair and equitable pay, and looking at this through an intersection. We know the statistics, dollar for dollar. Women make 80 cents to the dollar of what men make. At Southern California Edison, well, I'm proud of the fact that we've done analysis in this area, and we can say analysis internally that was verified by an external consultant. And actually, at Southern California Edison, men and women make dollar for dollar equal pay for equal work. As much talk as there is about equal pay in corporate America, it's something that not a lot of institutions can say, but it's absolutely critical to retaining the best talent. So that pay, that for the P in the pay framework, is all about equitable compensation. Let me move to the A, which is about access. Now that we've looked at paying employees equitably, do all employees have equal access to jobs and opportunities? So this is looking at career pathing, career growth, particularly the jobs that lead to higher levels within the organization. I will say the access, we think of this broadly, so it's also access to critical knowledge. I should highlight one of the practices of Women's Roundtable is our ERG focused on women in the workplace. And the head of, or the executive sponsor for Women's Roundtable is actually our CFO, Maria Rigatti. And one of the unique things Maria does is, after every earnings call, she hosts a session with our Women's Roundtable to talk about our company's earnings. And this is helping build the knowledge capital for underrepresented talent. We also think of this broadly in terms of access. How do we expand the talent pipeline for external talent for jobs coming into Edison? So that's access. The second A is around advancement. So now that we're looking at equitable pay and equal access to opportunities, again, career paths. Are we advancing employees in their careers at Edison? Have we mitigated the effects of unconscious bias at every stage of our talent management? And the E in the framework is for environment. Are we providing an inclusive, physically and psychologically safe work environment where all our employees have their opportunity to do their best work? So, I serve up that model as something that we've been doing at Edison around really not only counting heads, if you will, around diversity, but making heads count, building inclusive environments, which is really the heart and soul of where we need to focus on in diversity and inclusion.
Thank you so much. This is really a comprehensive framework. I know all organizations have a different sort of framework of D&I, and this is really comprehensive. And I really like that you look at D&I through the lens of employee experience and looking at both the micro level and also the macro level, the environment, how to improve diversity inclusion. So thank you so much. So I know, Luigi, that you've been in the D&I for a really long time. So based on your experience and in your perspective, what doesn't work and what works well? Can you share a few examples?
Yeah, absolutely, Amy. So I love this question because, I think there's few functions in corporate America where we spend as much time and energy and resources and money other than diversity inclusion, yet realize utter lack of outcomes. So it strikes me that we've got to start doing things differently. So your question was about what we're doing and what really works. So a lot of companies are spending a lot of money on unconscious bias training today. There's research that says that can actually have the opposite effect, and it can turn into a check the box exercise. What you've got to do is really mitigate the effects of unconscious bias, again, holistically throughout the entire employee experience, and really look at this work holistically. Full disclosure, I'm not born and raised in diversity inclusion. I'm actually a recovering auditor. And so this idea of looking at the entire process, a lot of companies are just focusing on, for example, talent acquisition. Well, it's great to recruit great diverse talent, but if you don't look intentionally at your environment, your pay, your promotions, you're not going to be able to retain your great talent. So what works is certainly looking at this conversation holistically. I'll say if you don't have strong CEO and C-suite commitment to inclusion, that leadership from the top, that's absolutely critical to driving this work. So strong CEO C-suite commitment, looking at this conversation holistically, and then I'll also talk about taking a data-informed approach. The numbers don't lie, so looking at intersectionality with a lens toward what does the data say, where are people stuck, where do we have opportunity? Are there levels in the organization where either a glass ceiling exists, or for gender diversity, or there are opportunities to where people are stuck in their career, et cetera? Is there high turnover in certain parts of the organization? I think asking different questions around the employee experience informed by your data is absolutely an area of opportunity and something we're driving at Edison as well.
Thank you. And I really like that your emphasis on the holistic view of D&I, and also that your mention of the data-driven approach to looking at D&I. And later on, we'll have questions about the measurement, and hopefully if you could hear more about that from you. So more specifically, what has your company been doing to create an inclusive culture where everyone feels a sense of belonging? They feel like psychologically safe to be their authentic selves in the workplace. Are you able to share?
Yeah, absolutely, Amy. As you can imagine, as a public utility in Southern California, we've had a long-standing focus on physical safety. That's absolutely critical for us. We're now evolving that conversation to talk more intentionally about what does psychological safety look like. We know that psychological safety is absolutely critical to high performance teams and to leveraging the full potential of our people. We've had conversations around fostering a speak up culture, leading with heart. Leading with, not only is the what and core competence around the job function important, but also those leadership skills and the soft skills, how to relate to people, how to meet people where they're at. As we all know, as goes the leader, so goes the culture. So better supporting and developing our leaders to lead effectively, driving the clean energy future with high-performing teams. We have a great ethics and compliance helpline. So when there are issues in the business, when things go wrong, there's a helpline our employees can call where we investigate and get to are there parts of our business where people are experiencing issues around psychological safety, et cetera. We live in a day and age of transparency, and there's been a lot of corporate disaster stories, if you will. about not getting ahead of problems or issues, particularly in your culture. So that transparency and getting ahead of issues is absolutely critical to us. And you know, really looking at you know, our brand and our vision, and not only in terms of winning the war for talent, but getting employees to recognize, you know, you can come to Edison, and the extent that driving the clean energy future is a part of our business strategy. I often say that working at Edison, you work on at least 2 out of 17 United Nations goals for sustainable development. That's clean and affordable energy and gender equality. And that this is a place where you can not only change the world in a very real sense, but you can also do that with great colleagues, and do that in a physically and psychologically safe environment. So lots of efforts in this area, Amy. We are happy at the progress we're making, but we're not satisfied. And I believe the only time you fail is when you think you're done. So this will be an ongoing journey for us at Edison.
Thank you. And it's great that you mentioned that the connecting the D&I to your organization's mission to creating green energy. That's really impressive. So you actually read my mind, and you address part of my next question. You mentioned the leadership skills. Actually, my next question is, how do you hold leaders accountable for creating an inclusive workplace? And in addition to leaders, do you think other stakeholders in the organization also have a role to play in creating inclusive work environment? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely, Amy. So, you know, culture in an organization is like air. You know, it defines the normative behaviors. It galvanizes your employees. In my previous experience was with Southwest Airlines. And so I understand the power of brands to really galvanize an entire employee force around meeting a business objective. You know, looking at culture and driving our critical business strategy around the clean energy future, we realize that we've got to drive accountability around not only the culture, but around diversity and inclusion, because it's absolutely critical that we have our entire pool of talent to drive our business objectives. So what are we doing? We actually are one of the organizations that tie diversity and culture outcomes to compensation. So this is a corporate goal for us around diversity and inclusion and culture. And so we have compensation not only for executives, but for in our short-term incentive plans, et cetera, for employees. It's actually tied to realizing our diversity and culture goals. So it's an example of how we're driving accountability in this area.
Great, thank you so much. At the conference, that I heard a really interesting concept that you mentioned is constructive descent. So what does it really mean by constructive descent at your organization? Or would you be able to give a few specific examples what it looks like at your company?
Sure. So in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, the world that we live in today, nobody knows everything about everything. You're going to have to rely on the perspectives and the knowledge of your employees to really achieve any great business outcome. So that points to the value of constructive dissent. So, you know, diversity, if you think about it, diversity at the heart of the business value of diversity, not really about what people look like. It's about what people can see. And when you assemble a great diverse team, different people can see different parts of the problem. And so this is why diversity is absolutely critical to our business objectives and driving our clean energy future. So how does that constructive dissent appear? From an individual perspective or leadership perspective, it's asking the tough questions. It's challenging or inviting folks to challenge the leader's decision. It's asking, what's the question that most needs to be asked that we're not asking? And so it's really trying to get at, how do you get people? Because there's either an environment of inclusion and great interplay of ideas, or there's fear. And you want to do again, I said earlier in the webcast, as goes the leader, so goes the culture. And so developing leaders who not only have the core competency around whatever their craft they have is, but also who engender leadership behaviors that invite our employees to bring their whole selves to work is absolutely a critical part of this. I'll also say organizationally, your employees, particularly underrepresented talent, are such great avenues of constructive dissent for the organization. Underrepresented, the fact that the company has 12 employee resource groups, leveraging the insight of our employees, where are blind spots in our talent processes, in what we're doing as a company, and really inviting them to be a part of this journey has been great. We have fabulous employee resource groups, and we actually just inaugurated our 12th employee resource group just this year. So as much as we have these things at play, this is an ongoing journey for us, and we realize that continuing to be humble enough to ask, what are our continuing blind spots? Where do we have opportunities, not only around business decisions, what we're doing, but also as an organization. And that is really powered by over 12,000 employees who work for us. We also recognize as we transform environments of institutional equity and inclusion internally, we're also able to better serve our customers in what is arguably one of the most diverse areas in the country in Southern California. There's definitely this holistic 360 approach to inclusion, commitment to our employees, our customers, our suppliers, and the diverse communities we serve.
Thank you. And this is outstanding phrase, and I'm going to steal that phrase from you going forward when I talk about diversity. It's really phenomenal. So I know you mentioned about the data-driven culture and diversity, inclusion at the beginning, and I'd like to come back to the measurement piece at a later time, but I think what you said earlier about embrace diversity, welcome different opinions, actually leads very well to our next topic on the agenda, which is our next two guest speakers will speak about is the allyship program at Expedia. So I'd like to switch the gears and turn to guest speakers, Kristen and Zach, to talk a little bit about their allyship program, Expedia. So Zach and Kristen, I've heard about allies and engaging allies for a long time, but I never heard of an allyship program. So could you say a little bit more about what exactly is an allyship program? Why did Expedia create such a program?
Absolutely. Happy to talk about that. First, I wanted to explain what an ally is, because we hear that definition a lot. An ally is any person who wants to take action for the equality of a marginalized group that they're not a part of. And the reason why we have a definition like that, which is something we've borrowed from Cheska Lee, who I highly recommend, is that we like to separate the difference between an ally and an advocate. I can be an advocate for women in tech. I am a woman in tech, and that's a position that I've held for a long time. But I can't be an ally for women in tech because I don't hold the privilege in that situation. So allyship really focuses on helping people understand the power and influence that they hold as a result of the privileges of their identity. The Ally Skills Workshop then really leverages that influence and power that people have, and we teach them simple everyday actions they can take to support others in the workplace and to really truly help create an inclusive environment. The way the workshop is structured is we have about 2 hours with a group of people. We like 8 to 20 is about our sweet spot. We spend a while talking about definitions. So we talk about difficult topics like privilege, like oppression. We set the ground for terminology so everyone understands what's going to happen. And then we spend about an hour going through real life scenarios that happen at Expedia Group. So these are things that we see, that we've heard about, that we've experienced ourselves at Expedia Group. And we break people into small conversations and let them co-create the ally actions that they could take to support other people. We then spend about the last half hour doing a wrap up and leaving people with a resource toolkit that they can use to leverage and continue their learning journey as an ally. I want to say, I know we talked about downloads at the beginning of the webinar. The download that we're going to offer from Expedia Group is a reference to Frame Shift Consulting, which is where I first experienced the Ally Skills Workshop myself. So about 2 years ago, I had been attending a Women in Tech Regatta conference in the Seattle area, and I attended an Ally Skills Workshop, and I had this aha moment of, Leegee talked about unconscious bias and raising people's awareness. I attended this workshop where I felt it really bridged that gap between that awareness piece and that action. So many times from unconscious bias training, people say, I have this bias, now what am I supposed to do with it? The Ally Skills action is that so what part. It's the part where people can learn how to take action. So that's what inspired us. I felt like that was a missing piece at Expedia Group. And again, we're going to provide the download for that workshop. All of the materials are free, online, customizable. They have a train the trainer guide. But Expedia took that and kind of redid it and customized it so that it would be most relevant for our employees.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you for providing the additional resources. So I believe that you and Zach would like to pulse our audience on the question about the allyship program. So I believe that everyone can see the question on our screen. So does the organization currently offer or are planning to offer opportunities for individuals to develop their ally skills? And we have 4 options. The first is yes, already in flight. Second, planning in the next 1 to 6 months. The third is on the strategic plan for the 6 to 12 months. And the fourth option is not currently planned. We give just another 10 seconds for participants to respond before we close the poll. Okay, let's close the poll now. So we can see that about 65% of the participants today say they are not currently planned. So Zach and Kristen, any comments on that or not surprising?
Well, I'm actually super excited to see that almost a quarter of companies have it in flight already. I would love to know what folks are doing to share some best practices and learn from each other. And for the folks that don't have it currently planned, I hope that you'll learn something today. Certainly the download that we'll offer will help you, but I hope that you learned something today that can help you start this journey yourself.
Great, thank you. And Zach and Kristen, so when you launched the program, did you hear any questions from employees and leaders about these programs? Did you receive any resistance? And how did you go about communicating this program to across the entire organization to gain leadership buy-in, also to encourage the broader participation across all the employees? Just curious.
So in terms of communication, the first thing that we started and honestly continue to do, we use our local offices and our local employees to help basically create the best communication style. As a diversity and inclusion team, we recognize daily that we use our own biases and our own socialization in terms of communication, meaning Kristen and I are living and working primarily in Seattle. our communication styles are heavily North American focused. When we are traveling to Tokyo, to Australia, to Gurgaon, India, we need to change our communication styles. We don't leave that up to everybody else to adapt to us as the privileged individuals working in a headquartered company. So our communication is really based on who we're working with. And we work, like I said, with our local offices to change that. And it could be the structure of our emails. It could be that emails are not preferred. That may be webcasts or BlueJeans are going to be a better option. We change it really every single time. The second part that I would add is we talked a lot about leadership so far over the past 40 minutes, and we rely a lot on our leadership teams. We usually bring them through the workshops. We try to first. We bring a group of leaders through, and then they can pass along that information to their teams, to their managers, in the best way that they know how. In terms of resistance, I have done diversity and inclusion work directly for about 8 years. I have been at Expedia Group for only a year and a half. I expected a lot of resistance. That was my bias, because in my previous life, I encountered a lot of resistance. I have not experienced much here. And I think it's because inclusion is already built into the Expedia culture and into our guiding principles. It's on paper. And we don't think that something being on paper means it's necessarily going to happen. That's why we created the Ally Skills Workshop. But because it was built into our culture, I more so find people that have just been waiting to be invited to the conversation. They want to talk about this, but they haven't had the opportunity or the space. A lot of what Kristen and I do is just create that space. So we haven't encountered too much resistance.
Great, thank you. And I agree that it definitely goes back to the culture of the organization. So how many people have participated in this allyship program so far?
We have a great infographic slide, if you all can see. And I'll run through some of the numbers here. To answer that question directly, we've had over 1,100 participants. So over 1,100 employees globally have gone through our workshops. And that means we've held over 90 workshops in 22 different global locations across 12 different regions. And up at the top of this slide, you'll see where we started. We started in Brisbane, Sydney, both of which are in Australia, and then we went to London, and then we went to Gurgaon, which is in India. That was extremely intentional. We are, like I said at the beginning, a global company representing over 70 countries. We did not start in the United States for a reason. It seems because of our biases, because of our privileges that we all have globally, because we're headquartered in the United States, we tend to flow the information out of the United States first. We didn't want them to have it first. We wanted to share that privilege. So we started globally instead of here in our own country. And then you'll see a couple notes. 95% of participants felt the material was very relevant to their role. That's wonderful data that we've been able to collect over the past year. The reason that that number is so high is because both Kristen and I are incredibly adaptable. We edit this presentation a little bit, probably every single month, because we learn something new from every country that we are presenting this at, either in person or virtual, and we change it based on what we learn. And then lastly, we're able to scale because our model includes a train-the-trainer program. So far we have about 60, it's over 60, like 65 global trainers of this one Ally Skills Workshop. And after every single week that we spend in a new location, we ask for volunteers, and we usually have many more than we expect. So they're really helping us scale this globally.
Wow, that's really amazing. And I definitely agree with the global aspect that you mentioned earlier. In the conference board, we are doing some research. We heard more and more about this from our members. That's why we are doing research this year on taking diversity and inclusion global. And we're also looking at the ERGs, and we're looking at the next steps for ERGs, and we're also looking at the variations across different regions, because it's slightly different for every region, every culture. So I really agree with that. And that's really amazing that you have already over 90 workshops held. So do you follow up with those participants after the workshop? And so what did you hear them say about this program?
We have, I'll let Kristen talk a little bit about how we measure, because I know, Amy, that you said we were going to get back to that. In terms of what we hear, these are just some snapshots, some quotes on this slide here across different global locations. So we hear things like, being an ally is a process. I can start now with becoming more aware, and then I can step in when I'm ready. That's something that we very intentionally give in our workshop. We don't expect everybody to be at level 100. I'm a super ally. I know everything about diversity and inclusion. It's 2019, I'm there. We don't expect everybody to be there. And we know that not everybody is. So we're very adaptable with that. In Gurgaon, we heard you don't have to be an ally all the time. Super, super important aspect about doing an allyship workshop. It's very validating for an employee to hear you don't always have to pick up the torch. You don't always have to be the ally of every moment because of two things. One, you may not be the best ally in that moment for a given situation. And two, if you're truly integrating allyship into an entire company, then eventually you will have hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands, all depending on the size of your company. You'll have that many allies around you. So you can put down the torch one day if you need to take self-care, because there will be somebody else to pick it up. And there's several other quotes here that I know you'll get these slides and you can read. But we've heard some great things from participants and developmental things that we've integrated into our own presentation.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing the comments from your employees. It's really insightful. So how do you go about measuring your allyship program?
Yep, so this is the golden question, right? How do you measure diversity and inclusion? This is something that we've struggled with, but that I think we've done a great job with the Ally Skills Workshop at Expedia Group. The first thing that we do is we survey folks immediately after each workshop. So that the statistic that Zach put up, around 95% of folks feel that it's relevant to their role. We ask about relevancy right after the workshop. In fact, we give them a paper survey. It's their ticket to exit the room. So we get 100% completion rate. We ask about the facilitator's knowledge. The really big question we ask at the end of the workshop is, was the content relevant and what could we do to make it better? So we get a lot of feedback because we're very location specific. So we're very mindful of being locally relevant on a global basis. So that feedback helps us improve each and every workshop. Zach mentioned that we make tweaks every month. At the beginning, we were making tweaks almost after every single workshop. What we've then done is a 3-month impact assessment. So 3 months after someone goes through the workshop, we survey them again. And we ask them questions like, how many times have you acted as an ally? We ask them how many times they've invited people into work conversations, even when we expect that they'll have a different perspective or a different opinion. We ask how many identities have you educated yourself on identities that aren't your own since the workshop? Those types of questions where we're really trying to measure a change in impact and a change in behavior on them. And I'm super excited to say that the vast majority of people, I think it's over 90%, have answered affirmatively and positively for each of those questions that I just talked about. So we're able to show that there is a change of behavior, there is an impact, and that one statistic around inviting people into work conversations is trying to show the business the value of having those diverse voices in those conversations. So we're super excited that we've been able to do that and to share that data with our leadership.
Thank you, and congratulations that you've seen the positive feedback from the participants and also that see the change in their behaviors. Really like that you do the 3 months check to assess the effectiveness. So in general, what have you learned from this program, from launching this program?
Yeah, we've learned a ton. I think Zach shared already one of the things, our key learnings, is that people have been waiting for this invitation to talk. So creating a space, giving them the space to have these conversations has been hugely impactful, and we've had over 1,100 people go through it. So that's really our first learning. We weren't sure people were ready for it, but they've been more than ready for it and more than ready to engage. They've been waiting for these. The second one is that launching a global program doesn't require a ton of resources. And when I say ton of resources, I mean both people and time and money, I'm sorry. So there's two of us. Zach and I have been able to achieve this in the last 10 months through that global network of facilitators that we've onboarded and with the support of all the different offices. So 2 people have been able to accomplish this in a 10-month period. And again, as I shared before, all of the original materials are online at Frameshift Consulting. So those are free and customizable. The travel, we have obviously incurred that as an expense, but this workshop I love because you can do it online as well. So for as little as $200 for a Zoom license, you can get a license to hold these workshops online and use the breakout room functionality. So there's a sliding scale of free to however much you want to invest in travel that you can really launch this program with. And then the last one is that customization is really key. So again, being locally relevant on a global basis, it's absolutely critical that we work with folks in every office to understand what scenarios they want to learn. Every time we go to a new office, we do a brainstorm with them as part of the workshop to ask them, what scenarios do you wish we would have covered today? So I have a backlog of scenarios for each of the global offices that we can then go back through and create scenarios and have a more relevant experience for them. And then even we can customize it based on audience, so managers versus individual contributors, and then language even. So this course is taught in Arabic and English in Jordan, and we've had requests to translate it already to Spanish and Italian for our folks in those locations. So being able to customize the workshop is totally critical, and the way that it's set up is very flexible and allows that to happen very, very easily.
Great, and thank you so much for sharing the major takeaways from launching this program. And it's amazing you only are 2 people and you've done so much over the past several months. It's amazing. Liji, I haven't forgot about you and regarding the measurement question, and I think that's something that our audience will be interested in knowing more about as well. So how does Southern California Edison measure the success of your D&I strategy and initiatives? Is there anything similar to what Kristen talked about, and anything new to add?
So the only thing I want to add is, so I had already mentioned that we have a corporate goal tied to compensation around diversity and inclusion. So that's really looking at, are we advancing underrepresented talent in every upper echelons of the company, but really throughout the organization. We also have the Paradigm for Parity goal. Again, public commitment to achieve 50-50 men and women in senior roles by 2030. So we are looking intentionally at gender diversity as well and measuring that. In those two, if you look at ethnic diversity and gender diversity alone, in our leadership ranks, manager level on up, we're over 50% diverse. Again, mirroring the diversity of Southern California. The other part of this is, again, it's one thing to measure diversity. It's a whole nother thing to really measure inclusion. So we look at our pulse survey results. So every year, we survey a segment of our employee base, ensuring that all 12,000 plus employees are covered over the year. And we ask questions that really gauge for and look at things like trust, equal opportunity sentiment, those around the pay framework, perceptions of access and advancement. So again, measuring in terms of, how have you advanced underrepresented talent, and where are in that data-driven approach, where are your real opportunities, but also culture. What are your opportunities to build a physically and psychologically safe culture of excellence, equity, and belonging? And allyship, as my co-presenters have talked about, is such an aspect of creating a culture of belonging. So we do have a focus on allyship as well. But those are all parts of how we look holistically at how are we doing across diversity, inclusion, equity, and creating a culture of belonging. Great.
Thank you, Leiji. And we do have about 2 minutes to address some questions from our audience. So one of the questions to Leiji, when you were presenting the pay access and events environment framework, so a question from Catherine is about how long has your company used this approach?
So the concept is not new about looking holistically across the employee experience. The framework was actually introduced and presented to our board of directors last year. So the framework for us is fairly new, although we've been intentionally looking at the employee experience for a long time. But having a framework is really helping us, and thinking broadly around those 4 parts of the framework is as of the end of last year.
Great. Thanks for answering that. And Kristen and Zach, a very quick question to both of you is, so Zach mentioned earlier that the D&I doesn't report to HR. So what does a team sit in your organization?
Yep, absolutely. So Zach and I do not report to HR. There are 3 folks that report into HR from a corporate diversity and inclusion function. But then we have a few brands like Brand Expedia, which Zach and I are embedded in, which is a business and technology organization. We have 2 practitioners, and then we have 2 or 3 other organizations that also have full-time D&I practitioners. What we're doing right now is reimagining inclusion as a platform at Expedia Group and determining how we can provide equal access, no matter where you sit geographically or organizationally, to inclusion programs and initiatives. So I don't know where that will end up reporting to, but the reporting structures right now are very mixed across Expedia Group.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to thank all the guest speakers today, Leiji, Kristen, and Zach, for participating and sharing your insights and best practices. I personally learned a lot from all of you, and I hope our audience have great takeaways from this webcast as well. So before I close the webcast, I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about our upcoming events held by the conference board. So our next conference keynote webcast will be on corporate communications and business strategy, how to influence and inspire. It'll be held October 10th, 2019 at 3 p.m. Eastern Time by our Communications Institute co-leader, Alex Parkinson, with speakers from Type A Group, CRISP, and ASPCA. And for those of you who are interested in today's conversation and were not able to go to the Brooklyn conference, don't feel sad, because we have another opportunity coming up very soon in November from 12th to 13th. It's on the West Coast. It's the same D&I conference, and with a topic on bridging the bridge to belonging. And I hope you can join us this time. So thank you all again for participating in today's webcast, and hope to see you soon. Bye.
Hi, thank you.